Welcome to the Compassionate Leader Circle podcast, where we explore what it truly means to lead with love. In a world that's moving faster than ever, this is your space to slow down, reconnect with your purpose, and hear about the kind of leadership that transforms lives and how it can do the same for yours too. Your hosts are me, Darryl Brown, Sarah Feely, and CLC founder Laurel Donnellan. If you're ready to grow, question, and to lead with courage and compassion, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. I'm recording this on a Friday. Happy Friday or happy day to you. You are in for a treat today with the podcast. We talked to Darryl Brown and Laurel Donnellan about principle number 2 of the Donnellan Method, which is faith. Practice is connect to inspiration. Whether you want to call it faith or spirituality or the belief in something good and positive, whatever inspires you and leaves you hopeful, that is what we're talking about today. Enjoy. Today, we are talking about the past. Whenever we go through a change or a learning journey, we go from the past to best understand the present and then learn from the past as we think about the future. Today, the principle we're talking about is faith. With every principle, we have a practice area. And the practice for faith is connection to soul. You can think about faith in a spiritual way, religious-based way, or not, but it's really this sense of something positive in your life, something bigger than yourself. I'm really excited to talk to Laurel and Darryl today about the role that faith plays in their life. So welcome, everyone. How are we feeling today?
Happy to be with both of you.
Yeah, I'm feeling really good. It's Friday, and I love Fridays.
And I love being with both of you. It's a real honor and fun. And I think we have to do a lot of administrative things in our business. And this is like, for me, the dessert.
These conversations allow me to dig back into what's going on inside of me. So I always welcome these little talks that we have.
I feel like I've been brought into like a circle of greatness, a circle of trust, because you two go back like 30 years. And I feel like the new gal who's like, can I sit with you guys at lunch? So I feel very honored to be here. And so we talk about past, present, and future whenever we do this work. And in our podcast, in a sort of a similar mirror of structure, we talk about history, healing, and hope. And Laurel, before I ask you about a specific story, I'm curious your take on why history and studying history is such an important thing.
Thank you for that great question. I love that question. I looked at a lot of other change models that sort of began with the present. Like, let's just begin with what's going, current state, future state. And in my own personal journey of change and working with organizations and schools and leaders, I realize that so much is informed by our past. And then if we don't really look at our past, we're not going to be ready to transform our present and our future. I think the other influence I have is being, being in recovery for 34 years. Taking a fearless and moral inventory of ourselves is part of that process. And it's kind of baked into who I am and how I work with others.
So, history, Laurel, I'd love to hear a story as we think about faith, a leader who comes to mind who's no longer living from any part of the world, who was a faithful visionary. Who comes to mind for you?
Yeah. Who came to mind originally was Helen Keller. And then I did some reading about her teacher, Anne Sullivan. So I'm offering two people today, Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan. And I just did a podcast this week with two educators, and education fascinates me, and how people are educated fascinates me. So I will say this, when we work with individuals, we talk about connecting to soul, and we go there with soul. When we work with organizations, we change it up a bit and we talk about connecting to inspiration, right? Just sometimes because the word soul can be triggering or connected, people connect it to religion. But for us, it's not really religious. It's just about tapping into a deeper, mysterious part of you.
You want to share any little bit about Helen Keller or what comes to mind? And may I add, Helen Keller was a Dallasite. So, right, Darryl, did you know that? She's a local here.
No, I did. I did
Yes.
not know that. Yeah.
Yes. And my mother-in-law, who was clearing out a very old library in a home she had had for many years, found a letter from Helen Keller, who she knew in her childhood, and
Oh my
decided
God.
I can't clean out anything ever again because I might have lost this letter. And so now that letter stays in that library. So I digress. But Laurel, tell us your
No,
thoughts.
I love that. I love that Sarah and Darryl are in Dallas and I'm in Austin. So this is a Texas podcast. I'll start with Anne Sullivan. She was a very poor girl, was living actually in a poorhouse and had dealt with blindness as a child and got herself into the Perkins Institute, which was the, leading place for blind and deaf people to learn things. Although she was brought up in a religious family, she wasn't very religious, but she got a lot of inspiration from writers. So one of her favorite writers was Charles Dickens. So she went to the Perkins Institute to become a teacher. She really had a mission, a calling to be a teacher. And Helen Keller wasn't her first student, but she had experienced blindness, and then she learned how to teach blind and deaf children language. And, it was very early years in education and education development. And she was a pioneer. The founder of the Perkins Institute was also inspiring to her, and she loved nature. So there's stories of her taking Helen out into nature as part of their journey. So there's lots to know about Anne Sullivan. We could do a whole podcast about her, but she is who I'm bringing with us today to explore faith and having faith. And then Helen was very religious. She lost her sight and hearing when she was 2 and was very unhappy about that. When Anne found her and started teaching her, they had a very tumultuous relationship to begin with. She was a voracious writer and reader and person of language. Anne took her to Radcliffe. She graduated Radcliffe, and Anne was with her when she graduated school and translated all the books that weren't in Braille. They had a remarkable relationship. And Helen was a woman of faith. She was very devout, wrote a lot about compassion and love and Jesus. And she was a faithful woman with a different path, but they were both very spiritual. And what they accomplished separately and together is just miraculous.
Before I turn a question to Darryl, as I think about the practice that we use as we talk about faith, which is connect to soul, how do you see that play out with Anne when you think about her life and work, that connect to soul?
Well, she had a very difficult life. Her father was an alcoholic and died early. Her mother died of tuberculosis. That she was in a poor house. So to me, like finding her way to the Perkins Institute and her calling and eventually to the White House after overcoming all those hardships, there had to be something bigger inside of her that she connected to. So connecting and just having a vision, to come from that place and to have a vision for how you would make a life as a woman in that part of our history. She eventually married as part of her story. She had a very full and rich but difficult life.
Now, Darryl, to you, Laurel's talked about history, and we're going to talk about healing a bit. And I'm curious, as you think about more of a current leader who you feel is doing really faithful work from a healing standpoint, is there anyone who particularly comes to mind for you?
Sarah and Laurel, I have to go back to Father Joe. Father Joe, and I talked about him in our last podcast about courage. He is the 95-year-old Jesuit priest who's my spiritual advisor. And when we talk about, I am not Catholic, by the way, and I would not call me really religious. My wife calls me heathen a lot, as a matter of fact, because I cannot repeat anything that, when I talk about the Bible, I don't know whether, I don't know. I don't know anything about the Bible. Anyway, I met Father Joe, who has been a priest for 77 years. I went to Fordham University, and Fordham has given me a lot has built, it's all about character building, the Jesuit way of life. And I am also in recovery. And in recovery, over these last almost 38 years, it is always about self-reflection. So when I met Father Joe 4 years ago, he, by the way, is the uncle of the president of Fordham University. So things are really kind of tight. And I will say again, there are no coincidences in life, right? There are no coincidences in my life. There is meaning to everything. If I take time and really try to say, well, I wonder why this happened. Right? This happened. There was a reason for it. And Father Joe, when I met him through the president of Fordham, Tanya Tetlow, I call him Father Joe. His name is Joe Tetlow. And he is a rock star in the Jesuit community. He's written several books. One of the books that he wrote about discernment has to do with what goes in your heart, connected to your head, is what you do and how you do that. And the only way you can do that is by spending time alone, listening to God's message to you, and then having the courage and faith to go out and do. He actually, as I said before, there's a course at Georgetown University based on his book on discernment. And when it comes to faith, he embodies faith to me. I talk to him every other week. Still, he's at what he calls the old Jesuits' home in St. Louis. And I ask him, I go, tell me a little bit about it. He goes, well, that's where they send Jesuits to die. And he's very matter of fact. He is very matter of fact about it. And when he talks about death, he talks about his own. At 95, it's coming. When he talks about death, he says, Darryl, I want to go to sleep one night and wake up dead. Those are his exact terms. And I said, Father Joe, can you tell me a little bit more about that? He has faith. His faith is that he's going to be with his higher power, who is God, who is Jesus. Jesus is his friend. And, when we talk, I love the way he lovingly talks about his faith and his friend, Jesus. I don't have that. I do have a higher power. I do have a larger being that I believe in. But I wanted to know from him how he proceeds in life with Jesus as his connector. And so that's why I love discussions with him. It's like, oh my gosh, man, how lucky am I? How lucky am I to have him come into my life?
Yes, Darryl. And I think, I'm what I'm hearing from you is like true deep curiosity, which is like a whole nother topic and one of the 7 C's of compassionate leadership, by the way. But I hear you talking, for some of our listeners who maybe don't consider themselves religious, or you hear God or you hear Jesus and you're like, whoa, like, what are they talking about? I listened to my first sort of Christian book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And whether you're Christian or not, this is a sort of a life-changing book. And the author talks about Jesus's life in solitude. And whether you want to call it Jesus or Buddha, or, there are aspects when we think about reconnecting to our soul, and whether you want to call it soul or just this deep sense of self, a sense of peace, there is a need for this quietness, right? You talk about this solitude, this sort of reconnection with yourself. What comes to mind, this idea of what does solitude, what does peace have to do with healing? Does anything come to mind for you when I connect solitude and healing?
Solitude, there's a podcast that I listen to. God speaks to me in silence. When I listen to that podcast, of course, there's 20 minutes of silence in it. The messages I get when I deeply give myself to that, which is faith. I'm having like, oh my gosh, I'm going to spend 20 minutes doing nothing, listening to nothing.
We're not wired for that. We're not wired for that.
That's exactly right, Sarah. We're not wired to that for that because we're wired to believe that we can do anything ourselves, right? And faith is all about understanding that number one, love is the answer. Whatever I do, make sure I'm doing it with love, right? What my thoughts are when I'm thinking, right? I sometimes think like, what's in it for me? No. What is the loving thought that I could have? So Father Joe really embodies that to me, and he tells me how to get there. I believe in Jesus, but I believe that Jesus was just a guy. He was just a guy that people wrote stories about, right? And he did things that I don't know, but I like the stories. And if that's where he draws his faith from, I'm all for it. I love the strength. I think that that's the word. I love the strength that he gets from his faith.
Beautiful. And Laurel, here's a question for you. And, we coach, we not together, but we are executive coaches, and we've helped a lot of people in very painful times in life, right? Who are needing a transition or go like, whatever's happening in my life right now is not working. And I need something else, and I don't know what it is. And there's a need for healing. What role does faith? You developed over years this really genius change model called the Donnellan Method, where faith is number 2 of 12. Like, we confront faith at a very early part of this journey. Where's faith, and why faith where it exists when we're helping people like this?
What we do, whether we're working with an organization to be more effective or an individual to transfer in from one career to another, we requires this practice of connecting to soul, right? So connecting to something deeper, right? And it can be so different for different people, but I like this idea of where do you get strength, right? Where do you get strength? And it's often not from doing something. It's about being more than doing, which we really have a hard time with. And the world is getting faster and faster. So we work with people or organizations. We try to help them first identify what is your positive point of view, right? So for Father Joe, Jesus is my friend is a positive point of view, right? For me, I get a lot of strength from nature, from just looking at nature or being at the ocean, figuring out what is your positive point of view, and then figuring out a practice that strengthens that point of view, right? So for Darryl, he has his silent podcast and he talks to Father Joe. That is part of his practice. Your practice can be playing with your children. Maybe your positive point of view is, I believe in the future of my children, and I need to spend more time with them doing things that aren't organized. For all of us, it's figuring out where we get strength, figuring out our positive point of view, and then doing things that strengthen that. And most probably for most of our clients is figuring out what that habit, that consistent practice is. That's the hard part, right? Like, for some people, like I had a client who wasn't religious, but he got a lot of solitude and thinking time driving. So just like driving in the country was his practice. For my dad, golf was his practice. Like figuring out your practice and then being consistent and committed to your point of view and your practice is essential to having a transition that doesn't drain you.
Sort of ongoing healing, right? This idea that like healing is maybe an ongoing practice, right? There's times in our life where we might need more healing, but it's really this constant, it's a consistent thing, isn't it?
Preventative healing is important because when something difficult like illness or death or a company folding, like when those things come, the crises come, having a lot of prevention time in solitude, in faith, in practice is definitely going to serve you.
Yeah. You know, it makes me think of, and I've used this metaphor recently with you, Laurel, in this speech I was going to give that I never gave, which is another conversation. But this concept of margin, right? Your margin in physics or in maybe engineering is the space between your load and your limit, right? So I'm carrying a load and my limit's here, and the margin is the distance between. And the more resilient you are, the bigger your margin. So, right, we've all been in times where like we are living at our limit, and that one thing breaks. Like the other day, my Avery turned on the blender before the top was on. Okay, so we can know what happens. I'm like, if I am too close to my limit, like I explode as the blender explodes. And if I have more margin, so this idea that like a practice of healing or a practice of solitude or a practice that connects you to soul is actually an ongoing strengthening of your margin, right? It's that resilience between limit and load. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about history. We've talked a bit about healing. And now let's look forward to hope. What gives us hope here?
So I want to talk a little bit about that, what you mentioned about margin. I also, that margin for me is muscle, right? It is, how can you build a muscle for the limit that you have, right? To respond to that limit, to widen how much you can really take. So when I talk about 20 minutes of silence, the objective is to do 20 minutes of silence in the morning and 20 minutes of silence at night, right? That's every day, not when we talk about consistency, right? When we talk about making sure that the load, is where it is accurate and your ability to handle the load. If I've done my 20 minutes in the morning and my 20 minutes at night, I kind of wake up with, okay, this is what I need to do. It's practice. It is about practice.
But do you think like when I use the word discipline, because some people like recoil at that word, like I don't know if it feels too hard to people, but if I said to you, like your silence to me sounds like your practice sounds like a discipline. What do you think of that?
Well, that's exactly what it is. Now, let's tie that into faith. I have to have faith that if I do this on a daily basis, right, I have to have faith that I will be more disciplined because I know me, and basically, I'm an undisciplined individual. I do not like for people to tell me what to do. I want to do exactly what I want to do when I want to do it. And sometimes that's not the best way to go into things. It's not the best way to talk to people. It's not the best way in traffic to feel in traffic. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I call it being right-sized. I want to be right-sized when I go in any given moment. And the more, my greater ability to be right-sized has to do with my discipline, right? Have I been disciplined enough to do my 20 minutes in the morning and my 20 minutes at night? So the degree is really all about, well, how willing am I to have faith in what I need to do to take care of myself?
I love that. And Brene Brown talks about like as we get more sort of mature, this ability to hold the paradox. And what I'm hearing you say is like there's this paradox of like, I really want freedom. I want autonomy. I want people to tell me what to do. And guess what? To get that, I actually need discipline, which bears paradoxical, but they're mutually reinforcing.
Well, they are. And I will also say that the older we get, the more overconfident we are in how we've done things in life. Because my idea, the first thing that comes to mind is, hey, listen, I've gotten this far.
Yeah. If it ain't
I've
broke.
got, hey, I'm 72. I feel pretty good, right? I've gotten this far. You don't have to tell me what to do, right?
Mm.
I, so that's why I need, and that's exactly why I need discipline, because that's when I call my, false self, true self. My false self is about my ego. My ego says that I can do anything I want to do anytime I want to do. Look how far I've gotten. Look how great I am. That's what my ego says, right? And unless I have discipline to break it down and have faith that there may be another message in here for you, right? And then have the discipline to carry that out. That's when the faith comes in.
Laurel, we're talking a lot over here. Is anything coming to mind as we talk about discipline and faith and practice and being older and ego?
I identify with the age thing. Yeah, I've gotten this far. I think my ability to have a long, healthy life is all about discipline. I don't like saying that out loud, but it's like what I'm doing for my body physically, what I'm eating, how much water I'm drinking. All of those things can add to my longevity. And I do like this conversation about curiosity because a lot of people my age are not starting new chapters with work. They're retiring. I'm running a company that's going to be very reliant on AI, understanding things like AI so we can help our clients. I don't have the luxury to say that, I'm done learning, I'm cooked. Like, I went to a conference 9 out of 10 days to learn about the future of education and the future of innovation. I love that, actually. I love that, but I love that this is a great topic. And thank you for doing such a great job of facilitating, Sarah.
Do you have, again, hope we'll get to you, but do you have a faith or soul sort of connect to soul discipline in your life, either currently or in the past, that's really works for you?
It's changed a lot. I mean, there was a time in my life where I meditated an hour in the morning and an hour at night. I think I did that for 2 years. My discipline right now is physical therapy. Like, I am getting ready for surgery and I have to do physical therapy every day. That is my commitment. I do a lot of other things, not daily, but sporadically. But it's very good to know what your discipline is because it's also not, and I'm doing another thing with a friend. I'm writing down everything I'm eating and sending it to her every day. So that's another discipline that I have in place right now. It's also really important to understand what you're committed to and what you're not committed to, right? Because you could have a lot of like, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And no, right now, physical therapy and writing down my food is enough. And anything else after that is a bonus. And, I'm also going to a lot of doctors because I'm having surgery in June. So I went to 4 doctor's appointments in one day this week. But there's also this concept of first things first, right? Like being really clear about what is your priority.
Darryl, what gives you hope these days?
Well, there's a saying in my recovery program, there are also 12 steps there, by the way. And the 12th step is really about being happy, joyous, and free. And my definition for happiness is tied into freedom, right? How free do I want to be? And the closer I get to faith, the more spiritual I am on a daily basis, the more freedom I feel. When I'm encumbered by self, that false self that I talked about before, when I'm encumbered by that, I'm not free. And when I feel like the blender is about ready to explode, I am not free, right? And I like myself. I like the way I'm acting in the world when I'm acting in that manner, that free, with freedom. So when it comes to hope, you said something before that really triggered a thought for me. And my hope is that we connect that piece of love that's inside of us, when we can connect, I have such hope for the world. And I want to be sure that I'm doing my part to connect with you and uh, everyone I come in contact with. I want to be sure that I'm connecting with you in an authentic way so that it helps build our community or the community that, and we're involved in different communities, but the overall community, right? We're here in Dallas. I can't complain about the politics here if I'm not doing anything to help in the political structure and policymaking. I have a lot of hope because I believe that there's going to be a groundswell of shared love in amongst us, right? Because that's the only way we're going to really survive long term for our kids, for your kids, and our kids' kids.
And you think, and what I'm hearing you say is that it's rooted in like an interpersonal connection to another human and openness to another human at a very one-to-one individual level, which then expands to a strengthened community. Is that?
That's exactly right. It has a spider effect,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you have an impact? You have to believe, I believe that what I have to contribute is going to have impact, right? I don't, I don't know if it will or not, but I believe that you have that same love part in you that I have in me. And that's where the connection happens. That's where the goodness, the common good really happens as a result of that.
Yes. It makes me think when we talk about compassionate leadership, I'm hearing you talk about like a sense of agency and ownership, the individual level, and it's just like a brief little soapbox lecture here about what compassion is. People use it a lot and sometimes incorrectly. Sympathy is I feel for you, right? I'm sort of on the outside looking in and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry for you." And empathy is I feel with you. I've joined with you in this feeling. And compassion is the empathy piece. I feel with you, but I'm going to take action to prevent and or alleviate your suffering. And so when we talk about someone putting on this, like, I am a compassionate leader, I'm going to own this. It's like what you're talking about, Darryl. It's like, I have agency in this. Compassionate leader doesn't sit on the sidelines and go, good job over there, bravo, right? They engage in the conversations, they ask a curious question, they tiny acts of love. To your point, it then swells and grows, but we all sort of have to own the piece in the puzzle. Laurel, what about you? What's bringing you hope?
So many things lately. I mean, we had this wonderful experience of our Compassionate Leader Circle Awards, and we were able to help tell stories of all sorts of folks doing amazing things. I saw an interview this week of Barack Obama showing us his library in Chicago that's much more of a community center and is going to make a huge impact on the south side of Chicago, where my father was born. And he talked about what he'd like to do 50 years, 50 years from now, people coming to that. And that he and Michelle are doing a lot of work with young people, which is amazing. There's two people listening to this podcast right now that are part of our team that have had children in the last year or so. People making that choice and raising children and having faith. Sarah, you having faith that your three kids are going to have a good life. I think that is what inspires me.
Is hope on a spectrum? I was thinking about someone who's like, I'm hopeful or I'm not. I thought, well, what if is hope on a spectrum where you've got a ton of hope and you get to the point of no hope and you can be somewhere in between? What do you think of that, Laurel?
I think that's true. My experience, I think I've had two experiences with faith and hope. I think there's blind faith and blind hope. That's more of a spiritual, mystical thing where I have no fear. So I feel like that's one end of the spectrum is like there's an absence of fear, there's an absence of no hope. that is kind of fleeting and not constant. I think what really my everyday life is more of a spectrum. But I'm curious what Darryl has to say about that.
I'm thinking about hope being a noun and a verb.
Mm.
When you talk about spectrum, the absence of hope, right, can be used as a weapon. It can be weaponized. And I think that if we're not careful about our own agency, we could fall prey to that, right? We can get into fear. So fear to me is the absence of hope. So hope as a verb is what you're asking us about. Hope as a verb. How can I, how I want to live hopefully, right? Again, agency, right? In order to do that, I have to do the things to take care of myself, and I want to be part of the community. I want to have, I want to do my part so that when I go to sleep at night, I've done my part. And that could be as simple as something as simple as letting somebody in traffic who may be rushing to get someplace, or saying to the grocery person who packed your bags, thanks a lot. I really needed help with that. That could be just all you do for the day, but that's not all you do. We have the ability to have impact on other people.
We talked about history, a little bit of history with Helen Keller, and we talked about healing and Father Joe, and we've talked a bit about hope, all in the context of faith. And if we hope our listeners who have stuck with us today are walking away here, like a bit uplifted, a bit like, I'd love Laurel and Darryl just to give us a brief, send off into the day. If I just listen to this on my drive to work or the grocery store, send us off into the day with something hopeful, Laurel.
Start with something just uplifts you. Don't think about it too much. Do something today that makes you happy or makes someone else happy.
Darryl?
I would say as you encounter other people, have faith in the knowledge that they love you.
Beautiful. And I'll tell you personally, faith has something that's really evolved for me. It's like it started as a place of discomfort. It's like, I'm such a thinker and I'm such a controller. I'm like, I don't even have time for faith, let alone really know what it is. And as I've sort of slowed down and become, I think, a bit more spacious and allowed for quiet in my life, I realize faith has become an increasingly comfortable and important place. So thank you, Laurel, for sort of taking me on this journey over the years. I thank everyone who's joined us here today. That's our wrap on faith, though it's never really a wrap. Again, I feel like I just sat at the really cool, wise kids' lunch table, and I got to participate in just the most uplifting conversation. So thank you, Laurel and Darryl. The next time this group meets, we're going to be talking about principle number 3 out of 12 in this change and growth journey, and that is awareness. And we talk about awareness as really learning from the past. They say there's no objective truth, only subjective reality. And that's usually in the context of a current state. But if we think about our past, it's really creating, turning a lens and an awareness to the past and saying, what do I want to make my subjective understanding and my objective truth as I look back in my life, and what's meaningful, and what is my cohesive story that makes me and my understanding of the world. So I cannot wait to talk to you all about awareness. And I hope we all go off into the weekend. It's Friday here. Go off into the weekend feeling a bit more faithful and hopeful. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Compassionate Leader Circle podcast. It means so much to have you here with us today. Every episode is an invitation to grow together, and we hope today's insights stay with you long after this conversation ends. Be sure to keep an eye out for our next episode. We've got more inspiring stories and practical lessons on the way. Learn more about our community of change makers at compassionateleaderscircle.com.